very warm good afternoon to all of you. Uh, Today we have invited Dr. Kanika Singh, and she is the co-founder of Delhi Heritage Walks, and also she is the director of Center for Writing and Communication at Ashoka University in Sonipat. She is a historian working on museums and heritage politics in India. Her PhD was on representation of heritage in Sikh museums in contemporary India. She has taught at Ambedkar University, Delhi, CEPT University in Ahmedabad. She has also been associated with IITM Noida for a very long time, and IGNOU also she has been associated with. So a very warm welcome to Dr. Kanika Singh for taking time out to take this session. Now today's session is on many layers of Delhi's history, Mehrauli Archaeological Park. Now, Delhi has always been the epicenter of various activities ranging from politics, heritage, culture, and it is the rich canvas of heritage buildings that speaks volumes of its monuments or its history. So today we have Dr. Kanika Singh to take to unfold one of the historical layer of Delhi, that is through the archaeological Mehrauli Archaeological Park. I welcome you, Dr. Kanika Singh, and you can begin with your session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yadav, for that warm welcome. I would like to thank the Indian Institute of Tourism and Travel Management for inviting me to this webinar. It's a great pleasure for me to return to the Institute and interact with its faculty and students. I was briefly associated with the Institute's work some years ago, and I'm very happy to see you all again. As Dr. Yadav said, the topic of this webinar has been chosen with great care. It's called Many Layers of Delhi's Past. Delhi is rich in history. Its urban settlements and its capital cities go back several centuries. And Mehrauli especially offers a very beautiful and a very exciting window into this past. So today I will take you on a virtual tour to Mehrauli Archaeological Park, sharing its stories especially as they are evident in its monumental architecture. I will share the photographs of the site as I speak, and I hope which will help you better experience the site, since you can't visit it now. But eventually, I hope it will also inspire you to visit it one day. So I will begin my presentation now. I will share my screen and speak as I show the photographs. Let me begin with some background information on the location and the landscape of the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. So the map you see on the left-hand side of the screen gives you some indication of how Delhi looks like as a geographical region. Delhi is actually a triangular bit of land. So you can see the river Yamuna, and I'm pointing towards it. You can see the river Yamuna flowing from the north to the south on the eastern side, and you can see the Aravalli foothills running again from north to the south on the western side. So this is the Delhi region, this triangular region, and Mehrauli is at the southern part of this line on the Aravallis. So the picture on the right hand side gives you a closer view of the location of Mehrauli, and you can see that it's right on the Aravallis. So those who are familiar with Delhi and Gurgaon, as you drive or you take the metro from South Delhi to Gurgaon, you might have noticed that the landscape is quite uneven. There are rocky outcrops on both sides of the road you are traveling. These are the Aravalli foothills, and which happen to be one of the oldest geological formations in India. To give you a sense of how would you see what kind of landscape you would see if you're traveling from South Delhi to Mehrauli, here it is. This is a picture taken in the Aravalli foothills in Gurgaon area. Coming back to the map, so the Mehrauli neighborhood today comprises the modern settlement of Mehrauli. It is possible that some of your friends or family members even live there. The neighborhood also has the World Heritage Site of Qutub Minar, the Qutub Complex, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And adjacent to the Qutub is the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. And this is the area where the first cities of Delhi were established. The Lal Kot in the 11th century, Kila Rai Pithora in the 12th century, and these were subsequently expanded by the early rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. And even when the capital shifted to other parts of the Delhi region, so for instance, in Siri or Tughlaqabad, or moving up north towards where Kotla and the old fort area is today, even when the capital has shifted away from Mehrauli, the Mehrauli region continues to be settled. It's never abandoned. So our virtual heritage walk today will cover just a few of the prominent buildings in the park, which belong to the Sultanate, Mughal, and the British times. And before we start looking at specific monuments, we must recognize that this is an archaeologically and historically a very, very rich area. So just to give you an example, when new buildings are being constructed in the settlement area in Mehrauli, and as we are digging for foundations, it's not uncommon for us to find remains of older buildings as we are digging to construct newer ones. And this has been my personal experience as well. I've worked in Mehrauli. I've visited the Mehrauli Archaeological Park for research purposes several times. So let me show you an example of what I once found while walking through the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. You can see that in the picture, there is a small clay toy held in the palm of one's hand. This is a terracotta toy shaped like a horse. And like I just shared with you, I found this in the Mehrauli Archaeological Park while I was there on research and exploratory purposes. A portion of the park had just been cleared of vegetation and silt, and this was a surface find. I didn't have to dig for it. It was on the surface, and even today, if you walk around, there are several pottery shards you are likely to find littered on the ground. So Delhi, as I frequently like to say, is littered with remains of its heritage. And in this virtual tour, I introduce you to some of the lesser known ones. Those who have not been to the park, when you enter there for the first time, and especially if you're entering from the Mehrauli Gurgaon road, this is the kind of view that will greet you. So you will see remains of monuments which are surrounded by vegetation. Some of these monuments are in a good condition because they have been preserved by the Archaeological Survey of India. But many others have practically collapsed, and often you find that they have been overtaken by vegetation. Some of these monuments have been identified. We know a little bit of the history, who built them, who lived there, how these have changed over centuries. But like I said, many more still remain unidentified. So the park is full of views like this, or for instance, this. So ruins surrounded by trees and an uneven landscape. So the first prominent building I would like to introduce you to is Balwant's tomb. This is the view of the tomb from a gateway nearby. So when taking the So the arches you see up front in the foreground is actually a gateway. These are arches of a gateway. And there is a clearing where the group is standing in the photograph. And in the background, about 100 meters away from further on from the group, is the tomb of Balban. You can see it right here. These are the arches of the gateway through which this photograph was taken. And here is a closer view of the same building. Let me give you a brief background about the person with whom this building is associated. Sultan Balban, or Ulugh Khan as he was formerly known, he dominated Delhi politics for nearly 4 decades in the 13th century. So the years between 1246 to 1287 can be called a period dominated by Balban. It's possible that you might have heard of Sultan Balban and his exploits in history textbooks in school. He began his career as a slave under Sultan Iltutmish. He was part of Iltutmish's elite corps of slaves, the Turkan-e-Chehargani, or the Group of 40. And he gradually rose in prominence, first becoming the guardian and advisor to a minor king in the 1240s, and then eventually becoming the Sultan in the year 1266. Now, this is actually a remarkable achievement for anyone living in North India in the 13th century. And I'll explain why. Balban's rule is also known for a very strong and a centralized government with very strict and harsh checks on protocol and behavior of the nobility and the army. So Balban declared himself to be the shadow of God. Some of you might have heard the term Zille-Illahi, which means the shadow of God. It's a title Balban gave himself, implying that he had divine mandate to rule, that God himself had mandated that Balban should be the ruler, and therefore there is no challenge to his rule. He also maintained a very rich and splendid court. When I said that all of this and surviving for not only surviving, dominating Delhi politics for nearly 4 decades is a formidable achievement, it is because this is a time which is marked by a lot of political instability. Externally, Mongols are all over Central Asia and they pose a very serious threat to anybody who's trying to rule in North India. The Mongols are constantly in the northwestern frontier, and for any ruler who's trying to consolidate his empire in North India, he has to meet this challenge. Internally also, there is a constant power struggle between the nobility. All noblemen think that they are equals with one another, and all of them have an equal claim to power. So in this situation, there were very few individuals who survived for a very long time at the throne, let alone dominate the politics. Balban was successful and rather brutal in eliminating all his rivals, whether it was his colleagues, noblemen, whether it were his juniors who have a potential of becoming his rival. Even the minor king to whom he was the advisor was killed off by Balban so that he could get to the throne. The tomb, as you see today, is ruined. It's completely ruined, and there is no grave in the main chamber of the tomb. Let me show you a view of the inside of the building. So the photograph on the left is a view from the inside of the building. You can see that it's quite bare today, and it's just stone walls with masonry and no decoration. But we must remember that this is a 13th century building and that it was a royal tomb, and it is likely that it would have been very well decorated. So today, where you see bare walls and just the stone masonry, the original building would have been covered in plaster. This is very similar to what we do to our houses today. So we use bricks and cement to create walls, that's our masonry, and then it is plastered over. The ceilings and the corners often have POP decoration. A similar thing was done way back, except that it is stone masonry. It is covered with plaster. It would have been covered with plaster. And when the plaster is wet, you use tools to decorate it with patterns. You cut patterns into the plaster. When it is dry, you paint it. And then you add tiles and calligraphic panels also as part of the decoration of the building. Balban's tomb doesn't have any decoration left, but later in this talk, I'll be able to show you examples of this kind of decoration from another building in the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. A notable feature worth remembering of this building is that it is one of the earliest surviving examples of the use of the true arch in its construction. I've provided a photograph, the one on the right, which is a closer view of an arch from the tomb. I'd like to introduce the next monument with a few lines of poetry. Please spend a moment reading this. The lines go, "On the day of separation from you in helplessness and loneliness, nothing consoles us but the sorrow we feel for you. O Jamali, resort to the door of the friend, for our refuge is the door of the beloved." These are lines by poet and traveler Sheikh Hamid bin Fazlullah, who went by the pen name Jamali. Pen name or is also known as Takhallus. So his pen name was Jamali, and it is he who gives the park its local name, Jamali Kamali. So if you were walking around the neighborhood of Mehrauli or even in the park and you asked any local person what they call this park, they are unlikely to say Mehrauli Archaeological Park, but they are very likely to say this place is Jamali Kamali. So it's the local name for this area. Jamali Kamali is also the name of the mosque and the tomb complex, which we will see next. Just a line about who Jamali was. Jamali was the official court poet in Sultan Sikandar Lodi's time, and he served under subsequent kings as well. In fact, till the Mughal Emperor Humayun. So in fact, he saw several kings rule in Delhi. He was a very well-traveled and a prominent literary figure of his time. The mosque, as we see now in the photograph before you, is built by him. This is quite a large mosque, and it is built in the local grey stone, which is commonly found in the Delhi region, which is called quartzite. So if you can follow my pointer, the stones here, all of this is quartzite. And there's also red sandstone, which has been used to highlight specific features of architecture, mainly for decorative purposes. Here's another view of the Jamali Kamali Mosque. So there is a large courtyard in front of this facade. The courtyard is in the eastern part of the mosque. And you can also see that the courtyard has a water tank.
Abhishek, kindly stop sharing your screen. Is some person. Abhishek, please stop sharing your screen. Abhishek.
Ma'am, I have removed it.
Okay, thank you.
May I continue?
Yes, you may continue.
Ma'am, 1 minute. Can you please turn off the presentation and just start it again so that it will be visible to all. Otherwise, it will go in.
Yes. So I'll restart my presentation from the point where I left it. So here's the courtyard of the mosque, and you can see a water tank in the courtyard. Here they would have stored water for ablutions before one goes in and prays. This is a view of the interior of the mosque. Some of you might find this image familiar because a similar image was used by your institute for creating the invite for this webinar. So if you go back to the invite, you will see that on the left-hand side, a similar picture has been used. Now, right next to the mosque, adjacent to it, is another large courtyard with a small single-roomed tomb, this building here. This is the tomb of Jamali Kamali. And you can see the Qutub Minar in the background. So this is the boundary of the courtyard, which is adjacent to the mosque. And this courtyard has in one corner this single room tomb of Jamali Kamali. Now let's take a look inside. There are two marble graves inside the tomb. They are very well preserved. And the one in the foreground, this one, is of Jamali. The second one is actually unidentified, but it is believed to be of Jamali's close companion, maybe even his lover. And it seems that he was designated Kamali simply because it rhymed well with Jamali. We don't really know the name of or the status of the person who is buried next to Jamali. So it's not impossible that for the sake of convenience, we ended up calling this couple Jamali Kamali. Now the tomb is especially interesting for its marvelous decoration. The picture on the left is an image of a corner of the tomb, the inside of the tomb, and the picture on the right is a magnification of this portion, this arch. You will recall that I had mentioned that plaster and tile decoration was common at this time, and I've mentioned this while talking about Balban's tomb. So the patterns you see here are a combination of incised and painted plasterwork and tile. So for instance, this blue band here of inverted lotus buds is tile work. All of this, these intricate patterns, are made on plaster, which has been cut into these shapes when it was wet. And to give you another example, this is the ceiling, which is again of plaster, cut into these patterns and painted. You can see how gorgeous it is. Now, the Jamali Kamali Mosque and Tomb Complex is a fine example of what is popularly known as Indo-Islamic architecture. This term is made up of two key words, Indo and Islamic. The idea is that with the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate in North India and with the coming of a new ruling class, this political change saw the introduction of many new ideas and practices in the realm of politics, language, food, culture, literature, and also architecture. So the Indo in the term...
Ma'am, sorry to disturb you, but we can't see your screen, ma'am.
I'll restart it. Is it for everyone that can nobody see my screen? Let me restart it. I hope this is fine. Coming back on to a discussion on Indo-Islamic architecture, I was saying that the term Indo in this phrase denotes architectural elements which were already existing in the Indian subcontinent's architectural styles. Just to give you an example, and you'll be familiar with these. These are things, elements like chhatri or canopies, the use of the lotus motif. You can see it here as well in the blue band here. The use of the kalash motif, jalis or screens, chhajjas or eaves. The second keyword, Islamic, in this phrase denotes elements which were innovations. And these are especially important ones, the use of the arch and the use of the dome. And these are architectural elements which you will be easily able to spot in famous buildings around you. In Mehrauli Archaeological Park, but also other buildings which we are easily familiar with. For instance, the Qutub Complex, buildings in the Qutub Complex, the Humayun's tomb, the Taj Mahal. I will not be able to describe all the elements of Indo-Islamic architectural style, but let me explain just one in detail, the dome. Now you know that Delhi's skyline is dotted with domes of historical buildings. But have you ever wondered how these domes are built? So after all, it is a curved circular roof over a building or a room which is not curved. The building and your room is either square or rectangular. So how does one manage this? And how did one manage to build so many domes way back centuries? So if you observe the interior of any dome, the answer will reveal itself to you. And let me explain this with the help of a few diagrams. So imagine this to be the plan of your building or the room where the dome has to be constructed. It has 4 sides. So these are the 4 walls of your building. And you construct these walls going up. Now you have to construct a circular dome on it. So what you first do is convert these 4 sides into an 8-sided structure. So convert the square into an octagon. And as you go still higher, we convert the 8 sides into a 16-sided structure. So you can see that gradually that the square has turned into a somewhat circular base. This can further go on and be converted from a 16-sided structure to a 32-sided one. So it gives you a base which is circular and a base on which you can build the dome. So if you visit the Mehrauli Archaeological Park, you'll be able to spot this transition in all the dome buildings. And I really suggest that you try out this exercise in any dome building which you might visit. Now, as we exit the Jamali Kamali Mosque, there is a path which leads us to a grassy hill with a canopy at the top. So here's Jamali Kamali Mosque in the background. The courtyard adjacent to it, which has the Jamali Kamali tomb. And we exit from here through this gate, walk down this path and up this slope to reach this point. We are also moving a little further ahead in time. So we leave the 16th century and we are jumping straight to the first half of the 19th century. And this is a time when the power of the Mughals is rapidly diminishing, and it is the English East India Company that is all powerful. So the company has a representative stationed at the Mughal court who is called the resident, or later the agent and commissioner at Delhi. And this person, this officer, is in charge of all crucial decision making for the Mughal court, including the finances. So effectively, the Mughals are quite powerless before this officer. And one such resident was a person called Thomas Metcalfe. And the area we are venturing into, the landscape you see before you and the photograph, was owned by Metcalfe in the 19th century. This was his estate. Now, Metcalfe was in Delhi as the resident and the commissioner between 1835 and 1853. He purchased a large tract of land in Mehrauli, including all the historical ruins standing on it, and then he went about re-landscaping it. He bought a tomb and converted it into his residence. He diverted streams and created lakes. He built carriageways for his horse-drawn carriages and also boat houses. And what was the name that Metcalfe gave his estate? He called it Dilkash. That is something or one that delights the heart. So Mehrauli today, I like to joke, Mehrauli today we know is famous for its farmhouses. And perhaps it wouldn't be very wrong to say that Metcalfe started this trend of creating farmhouses in this area, going by what he did in Mehrauli. Yeah. So let's look at some of the interesting things in Metcalfe's Dilkash. So the canopy you see on the screen, or the chhatri, on the top of the hill, near the Jamali Kamali Mosque, is called Metcalfe's Folly, Folly. Now, some of you may know that follies are standalone structures which are part of English garden landscaping. And they are often built in an older style to look like a historic building. And follies have no specific purpose other than looking good and of providing views to the surrounding area. You will notice that the word folly is also a pun. It can be a noun here to refer to the building we see before us, but it can also be used as a verb to denote the foolishness of Metcalfe's act. So Metcalfe's folly could be the building or just a description of what he did. Yeah. So you can choose what you prefer. There's another building already existing on the land he purchased, probably going back to the Lodi times, and possibly used for rearing and training pigeons. The building you see on screen before you. Now Metcalfe converted it into a boathouse. He expanded the building. He diverted a stream which would have come from the left-hand side of this picture. He diverted a stream into a ditch behind the building so as to form an artificial lake. So the steps you see here, which lead from the building into a low ground, these are the steps leading into water back then. So this is something like a ghat. So he took a building, made a ghat along one facade and created a water body along it. Here's another view of the same building. So if you follow my pointer, these are the steps which I showed you in the previous picture here. So these are the steps leading into water, and all this area would have been underwater. And the arches you see at the base, these are meant to allow the passage of water so that it's not stagnant. Here's another view of the same building, the boathouse, and you can see that this picture is taken from a height. This area is the one which would have had the water body. If you walk in through this arch, then you would come to the steps which I showed you in the previous slides. Yeah. So all of this area would have been once under water. Now, if I was standing in front of the boathouse, where the pointer is now, with my back to it, I would need to climb a steep flight of stairs to reach the final point, or the point where the photograph is taken from. And the next picture will show you this. So if I was standing just in front of the boathouse, this is what I would see. And I would climb this step of stairs, this flight of stairs, and this one, to reach the core of Metcalfe's estate. Another thing worth noticing is that this too, this is not just a functional flight of steps. Yeah, this is a waterfall as well. So you can see a narrow slit here for the passage of water. So the entire area would have been landscaped to look beautiful with cascading water here and there. So as we walk up, we reach this building, which was Metcalfe's residence. And today it looks like this. Now the original building here is the tomb of Muhammad Quli Khan, who was a nobleman and a foster brother of Mughal Emperor Akbar. So this is going back to the 16th century. Quli Khan's mother was Mahamanga, a wet nurse of Akbar and an important figure in the 16th century, which also means that his brother was Adam Khan. Those who don't remember these characters from history books will definitely recall the Bollywood film Jodha Akbar. Yeah, Mahamanga and Adam Khan both have a prominent role in the film, but mostly as villains. So Metcalfe, in the 19th century, Metcalfe purchased this tomb from the descendants of Quli Khan and extended the building. So you can see the portion which is jutting out here, these pillars, the walls with arches here, and including this one. All of these are what remains of the extensions made by Metcalfe in the 19th century. Fortunately, we have some contemporary images of this site. That is from the time Metcalfe actually lived here, and I'll share these with you. But this is how Dilkash looked back then. These are paintings from an album compiled by Metcalfe. He commissioned a local Delhi painter to paint not only scenes from his estate, but also other monuments in Delhi. So we have an album with more than 130 paintings of 19th century Delhi. And in both these images, you can see how his residence, the main building of his residence, would have looked like. So Quli Khan's tomb forms the core of the building, but you can see the extensions. There are at least 3 levels or stories of extensions made to the original building. In this image, you can see another tomb. This is the tomb of Adam Khan. And I mentioned that Adam Khan and Quli Khan were brothers. They were both sons of Mahamanga. The tomb of Adam Khan still survives in Mehrauli. If you travel to Mehrauli and reach the Mehrauli bus terminus or the Mehrauli bus adda, there's a big, large monument right across the road from it. You can't miss it. That's Adam Khan's tomb, this building. The locals call it Bhul Bhulaiya or the labyrinth. And this picture on the left also shows buildings from what is today the Qutub complex. So it's the Qutub Minar and the Alai Darwaza here. And to give you a sense of how the scenery looks like today, here's a view of the Qutub complex from the rooftop of Quli Khan's tomb. Now, all these building activities of Metcalfe, they might seem a little crazy. So there are boat houses, there are follies, there are waterfalls. Who in his right mind buys a tomb and converts it into their residence. So all of this might seem like crazy projects of a rich or an eccentric Englishman, but we should not dismiss them as such. Rather, you should try and see them as expression of the tremendous power he enjoyed in the 19th century Delhi landscape, including the fact that he was lording over the Mughal dynasty itself, who were once emperors of the entire subcontinent. So these architectural projects are a way to express one's power. Our last and final stop in this heritage walk is the spectacular stepwell from early 16th century. It is called Rajon Ki Bauli. Bauli, the word Bauli means stepwells. Rajon, one would easily think that it refers something to kings or kingships, but that's not correct. It probably refers to words like Rajgir or Rajmistri, which means masons. So then Rajon Ki Bauli would be the mason's stepwell. And as you enter the stepwell complex, this is the sight that will greet you. So this group is standing at the very top of the stairs, the same stairs which lead down into the water. And what you see from this end are the different stories and the levels. 1, 2, 3. There are arches and galleries made at each levels. And the stepwell has a rather simple plan. It is made up of a well, which is a deep shaft in the ground. Yeah. So you keep digging till you hit the water table. And a rectangular structure. So the well is here behind these arches. And this rectangular structure is built by digging deep underground around the well. Here's a view of the stairs from the other side where the arches were. So in the previous picture, the group was standing here, and this is the entrance to the stepwell. The group is standing here and looking at the well. Let's take a closer look at the arches in the well, before the well. So these are the stories you can see when you're standing on the stairs. The well is behind these arches. And the narrow arches you see here, or here, or here, these actually have staircases, very steep and narrow staircases, which connect one level to the other. So one can actually walk from here up a story or walk down another story from these arches. So all of this is interconnected. And if you were standing at the top of the well, here where my pointer is, this is where you'd be. So you can see that this is the opening of the well. The group here is standing right on top of this platform around the well and peering into it. And this is the rectangular perimeter of the Bauli itself. And if you were looking into the well, what would you see? This is a view of the inside of the well. You can see that there are round stones with each having a hole in it. And these holes, this would have meant, the idea is that this would hold some sort of a mechanism which would help you draw water from above. So if any one of you has actually drawn water from a well, you can stand here at this platform and you have a pulley-like mechanism where you drop a bucket into the water and then you pull it up. So these stones would have held that mechanism in place to enable the person who's standing here to draw water from here. And now I come to the conclusion of our virtual heritage walk at Mehrauli with a picture which is one of my favorites. Many of us have peered inside a well from the top, and the view is something like what you see now. But have you ever actually stood at the bottom of the well and looked above? Here's a view from the bottom of the well at Rajon Ki Bauli. I had the opportunity to go inside the well when the Bauli was completely dry. And I took this photograph in the year 2012. And it's one of my favorite photographs from Delhi. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of Mehrauli. Thanks.
Thank you, Kanika, for sharing such a beautiful picture at the end of this beautiful presentation. And definitely it was a virtual heritage walk that we have done to the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. And I could really feel that I was there only at Rajo Ki Baoli, or I was watching the Balban tomb, Jamali Kamali. It was like I was there itself. So it was very beautifully represented through your pictorial. In fact, you're a good photographer also. This is what we can see from the pictures that you have shared. And you have taken us through a time period from 13th century till 19th century. What a beautiful journey through these pictures. So thank you for this virtual heritage walk. I would like the participants, if you have any questions, then you can please write it down in the chat box, and Dr. Kanika will be taking the questions. But please write down in the chat box. We'll just check if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. I'm glad that you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope all the participants also enjoyed going through the slides. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thanks.
I cannot see any questions as such. You can just wait. Any questions from the participants? Actually, the walk that we did right now, so this is how much time does it take if we are doing it at the park?
It would take about 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay.
Yes. It's a fairly large area, and walking in between the monuments also takes time, but it's definitely worth a visit.
There is one.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Yes, Vivekji, you can ask the question.
This goes to Dr. Kanika. I was going through your presentation, and while on the step well, you mentioned that the Raj Baoli is known as the Mason's Baoli. Why do you interpret it as Mason's Valley? Do you think the kings would give that credit to the Masons during those times? Why not the kings themselves?
That's a fair point. It's unlikely that if I am the king, that I will not name the monument made by me after myself. But we must recognize that the word or the name Rajo Ki Baoli is not a contemporary name. So the Baoli goes back to the 16th century, but the name itself is a fairly modern one. Yeah. So it is very likely, and this is seen as a pattern across, for many monuments we see in Delhi, it's very likely that these names, which are specifically in Hindi or Hindustani language, are actually, they came into use when under colonial rule, say 19th century and even perhaps early 20th century, when through the initiative of colonial officials, especially under engineering departments, the archaeological survey and so other surveys, these monuments were, you could say, rediscovered by them, and they must have asked the locals that what is this monument, what is this building called, and so on. So my understanding is that it's very likely that many of these names come from that time rather than being original names. We don't have, I can say that we don't have the original name for this Baoli specifically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
There's one question, Kanika, one participant is asking, where can we read more about the park? Any specific book can you suggest for Mehrauli Archaeological Park?
There are a couple of books that have been released on Mehrauli. It's not exclusively on the park, but it will include other monuments in Mehrauli as well. But you'll get more information about the park. There is a book by Rana Safavi on Mehrauli. Let me type out the author's name. I think it is called Where Stones Speak. This is a recent book.
Okay. Where Stones Speak.
And And if you like, if you're interested, I'd be happy to share a short reading list and send it to Dr. Yadav later, if
Sure.
necessary, which will have more details about specifically the archaeological park.
Okay.
Yeah. But there is a lot of information available online on the internet. So blogs have some information. YouTube videos have
Okay.
information on on this area. So you'll easily find information online on this. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Kanika, uh, for this beautiful session. So I think so these are the questions that we have from the participants. And once again, I extend thank you for from IITTM Noida for taking time out for this webinar. And surely in future, as we have already talked, we will have one more session of yours. So we'll work it out with you and we will again come up with one more session. So thank you so much. Thank you all the participants for listening to this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.